This is Parker Hesse.
This is Sam Branks.
You have the pleasure of listening to Hawkeyes and Tallboys. Cheers, motherfuckers.
Welcome to the Hawkeyes and Tallboys podcast, featuring your hosts, Bo Freeborn.
You know, guys, even though we get 2 conference losses, we're still going to end up 9-3. We're going to win the West for sure.
Dylan Pond.
Here's the thing, fellas. I'm going with it. 12-0, baby. We're going to do it. Let's fucking go. Woo!
And Rob Wall.
I mean, that would be shocking. But we can do it. I mean, I think we can.
So crack a tall boy and go Hawks.
All right, welcome into another edition of Hawkeyes and Tallboys. My name's Rob.
My name's Bo.
And Dylan.
Dylan was still muted, but I'm Dylan. Let's go.
Perfect. And today we are joined. First off, we're going to crack a beer here. And I was chatting to you if you wanted to grab a beer. We can wait for you, Micah. We have some great guests on this week. We have a couple of guys who we joined, who we added us on Twitter, and we're able to have them come on to give their thoughts on this week's game we're going to preview with Kent State. But before we do that, and before I introduce those guys, let's go ahead and crack a beer. All right. Perfect. So joining us today are 2 special guests. First of which, Tyler Henry. He's a grad assistant at Kent State. He's the sideline reporter for all the different sports. He's a broadcaster for all sports except football. So welcome to Tyler. And then also we have Micah with us, who is at Fifth Quarter Maction on Twitter. He is a Mac fan and a Kent State fan. He's going to be watching all the action, as he put it, every Wednesday night in November. So welcome to both of you guys. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it so much.
Perfect. So today, guys, obviously we're Hawkeyes and Tallboys, so we love to break down every week our Iowa Hawkeye football team, and then so we're going to start with that. We're going to kind of rewind the clock back to last week. We had our rivalry game, which happens the second week in every season. And we're looking at Iowa State. And it was if we remember, it was number 10 versus number 9 when it came down to the game day. And it was an incredible game. We actually came away with a win, 27-17. So quickly, guys, I wanted to get your thoughts, and so we can break down, how this happened. I honestly didn't expect us to win this game. I think, Bo, you picked us to lose.
Dude. I did, and I was well surprised. I was
Yeah,
awesome
Bo's a
game.
traitor.
But yeah, you think about this. For both
Bo's a traitor.
you guys knew on the pod here tonight, the last 3 years I picked Iowa State to win, and they've lost. So I'm going to keep this bitch going. I'm going to pick Iowa State from now on so we can keep that thing going.
That sounds like
Bo's our resident traitor Iowa State fan.
Right? That's Bo. He's got a little bit of Central Iowa bias coming from New Sharon, Iowa, so it makes sense. He's got those Cyclones in his ear a little bit, but
Farming community, baby. Got to stick with it.
There you go. That's fair. But no, guys, looking at the game, it was awesome one. If I'm sure most of you guys listening got a chance to watch. If our Kent State friends did not, just so you know, the defense caused 4 turnovers, looked great. Supposed All-American quarterback Brock Purdy threw 3 interceptions. All-American Brees Hall fumbled the ball at his own 6-yard line. Maybe it was 4-yard line. I can't remember exactly what it was, but Jack Campbell had a scoop and score after that. So overall, the defense was just an absolute unit. That was great to see, and really echoed what we saw in that first game versus Indiana as well. Some of the negative things we'd heard a little bit, Spencer Petras' stats, he went 11 for 21, 106 yards and a touchdown that he threw to Charlie Jones, which was an absolute dime of a pass. But overall, he had his highs and he had his lows in the game. I've heard a lot of shit talking from Iowa State fans, et cetera, this week about, how our offense isn't where it needs to be. Let's not act like we just played two slouch, FCS teams, because that's not the case. Like, both of these teams are, had phenomenal secondaries and phenomenal pass rushes as well. So just to come out of those games with W's, I think that's the most important thing. And really the last thing I wanted to touch on, we've talked about it year after year, and I think the Kent State fans are going to know where I'm talking about too, watching a little bit of their film. But this was one of those classic Kirk Ferentz, what we call the boa constrictor games. So, there's teams out there, you think SEC, you think Big 12, and what do? They typically go for the jugular. They want to beat you 55-0. Not Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes. They want to grind you out into the fourth quarter where, it's 14-10 going into half. You still feel like you got a shot, but slowly but surely, they're going to, maintain time of possession, not turn the ball over, and score points, frankly, and use the punting game and use special teams to help them win the game as well. So this was just one of those classic games where the score always looked close, but those of us watching, I think we can all agree it never felt close, or at least it didn't feel close to me. I never once had a doubt that Iowa was going to win this game. I guess, what do you guys think?
I thought the coolest part about it was that College Game Day was in Ames. I mean, for basically the second year in a row, so to speak, with normal football terms. But they had obviously an Iowa faithful, Ashton Kutcher, who was going to pick the Hawks, came in a big black combine, which was dope as hell. And then when Corso put on that Hawkeye hat, I was like, oh, let's fucking go. We're in for a game today, boys. And it was a lot of fun. So, and then like you said, Bill, won the field position battle, played one hell of a game. Defense looked awesome, and really looking forward to this next game.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Some things to note about the game, guys. Defense caused 4 turnovers, like you said, Dill. Spencer Petras didn't have an outstanding, passing, outing, but he was there and he was able to get it done. He pretty much managed the game. He didn't make any huge mistakes. Tyler Goodson had 21 carries for 55 yards, but he did have a touchdown. I think really when it comes to this game, and the biggest one, obviously one of the most interesting things about this team right now is it was their 24th straight game of the defense not allowing the other team to score more than 24 points, I believe. 23, 24, maybe it's 25. It's somewhere in there anyways. Is it 24?
Yeah.
Okay. I've said this stat so many times, I get the numbers switched around because I'm just counting each game. You know what I mean? But anyways, it was a wonderful game. It was great to I was actually out of town, so I was not on last week's podcast, but it was great to come back to Iowa and, see that score and rewatch that game and all that. So
Absolutely.
Perfect. So moving forward, guys, we are going to look at this next week's game against Kent State. And looking at this Kent State team, guys, I'd just like to maybe toss it down to our guests. And, tell us a little bit about this Kent State team, because to be honest, like the only reason why I know what state Kent State is even in is because of that Neil Young song, Ohio, or I think that's what it's called.
Well, this is not the same Kent State team that everyone saw a season ago. I mean, everybody talks about Sean Lewis and what he's done to kind of revamp this team, and they talk about the flash fast offense. And of course, the numbers back that up. I mean, you look at what they did last year to 4-game sample size. They had the number 1 scoring offense in the nation. They had the number 1 total offense when it comes to yards gained in the nation. But that defense was terrible a year ago. You're talking about a defense that was bottom 10 in the country in yards allowed on the ground. This year, they have completely turned things around. They have tightened that up, and they've done so with turnovers as well. This is a team that's number 1 in the nation in interceptions. They're number 1 in interceptions, number 2 in turnovers gained, number 3 in turnover margin. And they're also number 3 in the nation right now in rushing touchdowns. So this is a team that has shored things up on the defensive side. That's really what surprised me and what I think has surprised a lot of people here. And again, you look at the game against VMI. Yeah, that's not a very good football team, but at the half, they held Texas A&M, who at that point in the season were 4th in the nation. They only had 10 points and 200 yards on the board before the depth kind of overcame what Kent State could put out there on the field. So this is not the same team as last year. This is not your classic MAC team that's going to need to win in a shootout. This team is for real, and I think they can surprise some people this weekend.
And going off of what Tyler just said too, Kent State also leads the country in rushing right now. And something that he kind of mentioned was touchdowns, but granted, a lot of that did come against VMI. But talking about 336 yards of total offense against Texas A&M. I mean, I get it. It's Colorado. They're not the powerhouse that, the 1980s and 1990s type teams. But I mean, Colorado had less total yards than Kent State did against Texas A&M. So something to obviously keep an eye on, if you're a Iowa fan. Plus, I always like the humble, you guys are talking about your big win over Iowa State. Last year, Kent State dropped 69 against their rival. So I think we had a more impressive win against our rival. So there is that as well. I'm just putting that one out there where the flash pass offense, like he mentioned, is just something that we really didn't get to see it too much against Texas A&M. They actually, like Iowa should dictate the pace, that will slow down, Kent State. But you'll see when they get first downs, you're not going to be able to show a replay. They're going to be lining up 10, 15 seconds later and snapping the ball, which Big Ten fans are probably not used to.
I think we heard today in the player conferences or interviews, whatever, that this is the fastest paced team that they think they've ever seen play on film. I mean, they just get to the ball and they love to snap the ball, like you alluded to. So it'll be interesting to see what Iowa does against this, because we saw a team in Iowa State that does like to go hurry to the ball, but not as fast as them, as Kent State, and then obviously not as continual as Kent State.
Oh, absolutely. And great preview, guys. A lot of that information I didn't know, so I really appreciate it. But, just digging into a little bit of some of our homework and film study and that sort of thing, I know Tyler mentioned it, talking about last year a little bit, that 3-1 record, beating Eastern Michigan, Bowling Green, Akron. What I couldn't believe looking at just the schedule, just purely the numbers from last year, is just the amount of points that Kent State offense was putting up, even last year, losing to Buffalo 41-70. I mean, that's in a game you lose and you still score 41 points. Like, yeah, that's not something we're used to in the Big Ten anyway. So just incredible. And I guess I would just want to hear you guys, maybe talk a little bit more about that offense. And, I got down as some of the impact players to keep an eye on, quarterback Dustin Crum, running back Marquez Cooper, wide receiver Nykeem Johnson. Anybody else I'm missing there on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, Xavier Williams is one of the biggest ones. They talk about that 2 running back tandem that they like to run between Marquez Cooper and Xavier Williams. And it really is kind of a thunder and lightning kind of a thing. Cooper is kind of the more classic one cut kind of a back, whereas Williams, he can come out of the backfield, he can catch passes. But typically he's the guy they go to, and they need 1 or 2 yards, if they need to pick it up quickly. But yeah, I mean, again, you wanted to elaborate on the offense a little bit. Just to give you the numbers from last year, I mentioned they were number 1 in the nation in both. They averaged 50 points and 607 yards per game in those 4 games. And again, you're not going to see those kinds of numbers put up in a full season this year with a much stronger strength of schedule. But they're able to do things that they just weren't able to do last year. And I think one of the biggest things that we saw in that VMI game, and yeah, it was an FCS opponent, but they were able to get such a good push. I mean, they literally there for a while, Dustin Crum, one of the better quarterbacks in the nation, did not attempt a pass because they didn't need to. They just kept running it down VMI's throat. And they're not going to be able to do that against a stout Iowa, defensive line. But again, just seeing kind of the growth and seeing, where this offense has come from, they're no longer relying exclusively on gadgets. Now they have the tools where they can go out and they can hit you how they want, when they want, with that flash fast offense.
Something to mention too. I mean, you mentioned VMI. I mean, I understand it's an FCS team. Obviously, Iowa has played 2 incredible opponents in back-to-back weeks. So shout out to Iowa for that. But, VMI was a FCS playoff team that took JMU to the ropes in the spring. I played in high school with a couple kids that actually are at VMI currently, and actually talked to them a little bit after that Kent State game. And one thing they mentioned was, again, just how easy it was running the football. And, you look at VMI's defense, that's actually what their strength of their defense is. I mean, I don't want to go into a VMI preview, but VMI's defense is based on their actual ability to stop the run. They play teams like the Citadel. They play teams like Furman that are running FCS top runners every single year. So to see Kent State have that much success, something that's very promising, and something too to kind of note when we're going to Texas A&M. Yes, it was 41-10. Obviously, that kind of shows you that Kent State got outmatched, but Kent State turned the ball over in the red zone twice. So they were getting down the field. It wasn't like that Kent State was out here, punting after a 3-and-out or maybe getting one first down on a drive. They were moving the football. Again, they had way more success than Colorado's offense had against Texas A&M. And at the end of the day, too, we're talking about offense. This is a shot at Iowa State. I think that Kent State has a better quarterback. I think Justin Crum is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy, to be completely honest with you.
Wow.
Whoa, I love that hot take. We got some Iowa State fan listeners too, believe it or not. So they might come after you for that one, Micah, but that's okay.
Well, if Brock Purdy was so elite, he would win. He would win some games that actually mattered. I'm just saying.
I like that.
You might actually win. They won't upset Oklahoma when they're down. I mean, that's all I got to say.
Love it. At fifth quarter action. I'd love to look at so I actually did end up catching a little bit of that Kent State Texas A&M game, and you could look at which is interesting. I actually was looking at that betting line too, because if you look at that at halftime, that game, it was 10-3. So it was pretty close until the second half. But I mean, it was very interesting to see like a team like Kent State who has that ability to, just put so many points on the board and like keep it close the way they did. I think Iowa's going to be hard pressed to, if we get into like a shootout situation, which I hope that our defense is able to step up. But another interesting thing to look at when you look at this upcoming game, guys, I just pulled up the DraftKings odds here for our degenerates out there. But we're looking at, if Kent State's at 230, it's at Iowa is minus 22.5 as the favorite, and the over/under is at 56.5, which, I mean, as far as like college lines go, isn't insanely high, but I could see a world in which the over hits on this game for sure.
Yeah, I'm taking the over for sure, and also I don't hate Kent State to cover. I think I had some questions about this team going into that Texas A&M game, and I think those questions were answered. And look, I was going to be a tough team here, and obviously I'm not saying that I think Kent State's going to come out here and pull an upset against a Big Ten opponent, because at the end of the day, that's what happened against A&M. You've got, you're three deep at every position with guys that would start on any team in the MAC. But that being said, I think this game stays close at least through the half, and I like Kent State to cover. I really do. I think that especially with what I saw last week and then kind of getting things rolling and establishing that confidence with some new guys in that offense, I think this team is set to cover this week.
To top off that, I mean, it's my question. I think Kent State covers, but I guess the question, again, this is more for the Iowa guys. I mean, I don't know Kirk Ferentz's history with letdown games, but if as someone that just follows college football, this just screams letdown game for Iowa. I mean, you just played two top 15, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Indiana was top 15, right on the cusp of a top 15 team when you played them. That's 2 weeks in a row. You can't tell me that. I mean, most teams in the country have a letdown when it comes to, you see Kent State on your schedule and you've just beat your top 10, top 15 teams, and you're sitting pretty at, as some people even say, as high as number 3 in the country in some of these AP ballots. I mean, is that something that maybe concerns you guys? Because if that's the case, that's where Kent State covering is pretty confident for me. Is that, again, Kent State just keeps it close. Again, talent-wise, they're not going to be able to compete with Iowa. But I guess, do you guys think that's a possibility for your Hawkeyes?
I'll take this one as somebody that was in the stands to watch Iowa lose to FCS, North Dakota State. I definitely think that's a possibility where, if that team doesn't come out, and which it doesn't sound like they're doing this necessarily, but if you come out and you don't take Kent State seriously, I think they got the offensive firepower that they can make your life hell. I think, and all you got to do is look at that first half of that Texas A&M game to see that. So what I'm hoping as a fan is that they're, not, because you call it a letdown game, Micah. I'm thinking of it more as like a look past them game, like, okay, we got Kent State and Colorado State back to back. Okay. Yeah. We'll get everyone going and we'll be ready to go for Big Ten play, or for the rest of Big Ten play anyway. So I could definitely see that, to where thinking that Kent State can cover is definitely a real possibility, I guess. Bo, Rob, what do you guys think?
Yeah, and one other thing I want to bounce off that too is that Kirk is very well known for not opening up the playbook. So knowing this, him and Brian are probably going to call a pretty conservative game. So with Kent State being able to score some points, I do wonder how much Iowa is going to be able to be effective on offense, especially with the struggles we've seen the last couple of weeks. Because even with Iowa State, our offense didn't look great at times. We didn't run the ball well. Outside of that big run in Indiana, we really didn't run the ball very well there, move the ball down the field, at least in my opinion, very well. So I think Iowa's going to have a great defensive game, knowing that. But on top of that, if we can't get the ball rolling here, it definitely screams like a potential upset as well. I also want to note, too, that I love Kent State's Twitter account going and saying that this may be a huge upset week for Kent State, too. I love the shit out of that.
That was their Barstool account, wasn't it?
Oh, was it? I thought it was their football account.
It was their Barstool. I mean, I'm on that train too. I did a 5, again, more of a Mac page, but I did 5 bold predictions going into the season. And one of them was Kent State wins one of their non-conference P5 games. I don't know if you've seen Kent State's schedule. I would argue it's the toughest non-conference schedule in the MAC. They go to Texas A&M, they host VMI, they go to Iowa, they go to Maryland next week. I had them winning one of them. I'm leaning the Maryland game when I made that prediction, of course, but I still think Kent State's got a shot of doing that. And Kent State loves to schedule big games next year. Kent State goes to Georgia. They go to Washington. I mean, you're talking about a program that, they're money games. Let's be honest, what they are. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Coach Lewis is setting them up to see what it's like to be a big boy program. Kent State, in my opinion, is more of a MAC follower. Tyler, of course, is on the sidelines in good old Kent, Ohio. But, Kent State's the program that is trying to be like that NIU, that Western Michigan, when they were making, NIU's Orange Bowl trip against Florida State, Western Michigan in the Cotton Bowl versus Wisconsin. This is the type of program that's what Kent State's trying to be. Kent State has probably one of the worst facilities in the MAC, and yet they're still able to recruit top talent. At the end of the day, this is a coaching staff that, again, I'm not saying that Coach Lewis by any means better than Coach Ferentz. That's why, this is not favorable in that sense. But that's why Kent State's so good, is Coach Lewis is able to outcoach 75% of their schedule. So that's something, too, that I think kind of leaning on Kent State as well kind of gives me some confidence that this game could be pretty close. I've even debated making the drive over from my new home in Nebraska for this one, just because I think there's maybe a chance it's worth at least making a 5-hour drive for it.
That's excellent. I think, one thing that we say all the time when we're looking at the Hawkeyes, especially on this show, is that Dylan, and I don't know if you want to say it, but usually every year the Hawkeyes will win one and lose one that they should.
Every single year. It never fails.
And this one, I think, is a little bit scary going into, especially ranked so highly so early in the season, to be going against a team as different as Kent State is to the rest of their schedule. I think this game for sure is, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about this, Tyler, but it's interesting that the way that they their flash fast offense is constructed, because almost strategically it kind of takes away some of the scheme out of a defense, and really makes our defense, or any defense, really rely a little bit more on their athleticism and their conditioning and things like that. Which, to be honest, I don't know. I can't really say for sure if our defense has been tested like that so far.
Yeah, I think A&M had a pretty good game plan against it. But the thing of it is, it's not so much that they're going to hit you on the big plays. It's that they're going to keep you back on your heels, and you're just not going to have a chance to set yourself and figure out what it is that you want to do. And so you find out pretty quickly in the first couple of quarters whether you have a game plan in place that can stop that type of offense or not. But a lot of people are going to look at this game and they're going to pick apart, can the Iowa defense, because Big Ten teams classically known for their defense, can the Iowa defense stop the flash fast offense? That's not what I'm looking at in this game. What I'm looking at in this game is, can Iowa hang on to the football? Because that's been the problem for these first two opponents. Texas A&M, 4 turnovers. VMI, 4 turnovers. You're looking at a situation where Kent State is top in the country in interceptions, second in turnovers forced, as I mentioned before. That's where they've gained that momentum, because you take a defense that has 5 minutes over on the sideline with their defensive coordinator trying to put the pieces together. And now, oh shit, we've given up the ball. We got to get back on the field and go back to work. So I guess for me, that's almost a bigger factor than, the Kent State offense against this Iowa defense. My question to you guys for this matchup is how confident are you in Iowa's ability to not turn the ball over to a defense that has just been jumping on every opportunity so far this year?
And with that being said, I think that Iowa's going to try to run the ball as much as they can. I think that Tyler Goodson's going to get a ton of carries. I think that Ivory Kelly Martin's going to get a ton of carries. I know that, you had alluded to Kent State's defense being a lot better against the run, but I think Iowa's going to do the best they can to run it down their throats and throw as minimal as possible, knowing that their DBs and secondary has been so good so far this season.
Oh, absolutely. And you look at, these past 2 games for Kent State as well. And although, like Tyler said, it's clear that their rush defense has gotten a lot better, but still in the last couple of games, you've given up, 445 yards on the ground. So I still think that's where Iowa's bread and butter plays well into that. And, essentially how Iowa's going to win this football game, given a little preview of Dylan's keys to victory is, time of possession, holding on to the ball, keeping the ball, out of that flash fast offense's hands. And, by not turning the ball over. And I think we've proved versus 2 very, very tough defenses, week 1 and week 2, that, Iowa can avoid turning the ball over with the exception of, a couple fluke fumbles versus Indiana. But that's one of those things that Spencer Petras has done very, very well this year. All criticism aside is he hasn't thrown interceptions. He hasn't turned the ball over. I'm sure you guys can hear that. I was just knocking on wood and that just made the dogs in the background go ape shit. So I apologize for that. But, just try not to jinx ourselves here. And then I end up doing that. So apologies, but anyways,
really,
very, very confident in the offense there.
Sure. And really quickly, one last point. I know you guys mentioned this might be kind of a look past them kind of game, but I don't think that's going to happen. I've seen this a lot in college football, but you look at the situation, you're talking about a team that was a known quantity coming into the season. And then you're talking about a team that held 4th ranked Texas A&M to 10 points at the half. It was 10-3. So, again, maybe Iowa looks past an opponent at some point this year, but I think that's enough of a warning shot to any competent coaching staff, which Iowa certainly has, to look at that and get their guys ready to go and say, look, this is a real opponent. We need to take this game seriously from the get-go.
And something to add to that too, I think, he mentioned it to a point that the 10-3, Kent State's biggest issue, and you might think it's crazy to say that considering their ability to put up points, but they're not good from coming from behind because they are such an up-tempo offense. They'll start slinging the ball around like crazy. I mean, we talked about the turnovers that Kent State caused. Dustin Crum threw 2 interceptions against Texas A&M too because he's trying to force stuff. They're playing from behind. Texas A&M went down and scored pretty early in the first quarter. And yes, it's only 7-0, but when you're a team like Kent State playing a top 5 team on the road, when you go on the road like that, when you're down early, you're trying to make things happen quickly. And that's Kent State's biggest, issue sometimes with this flash fast offense is their inability to kind of come from behind because they're going so fast. Sometimes they almost go too fast for their own well-being. So like if Iowa can win the opening kickoff, drive down the field, and a good old 5-6 minute Iowa type rush to run the clock, pound the rock, use those offensive linemen kind of situations, Kent State's going to have to come out here. And the nice thing about Kent State offense is it can score, but it also has a lot of quick 3 and outs. I mean, Kent State could really screw themselves over by trying to go up tempo against Iowa, have a 2-minute drive, and then the defense is coming back on the field after being ran for 7 minutes because Iowa can just pound the rock like that against Kent State. So if Iowa can jump out early, in my opinion, like for example, if it's 14-0, 14-3 going in the second quarter, I think Iowa's going to cover with ease because Kent State's just not going to be able to keep up. But if it's kind of like what Kent State did with Texas A&M, where again it was 10-3 after 1, but then it kind of slowed down a little bit. Yes, you can look at the fact Kent State slowed down Texas A&M, but Kent State, that was when Kent State was making those big mistakes. They had a chance to actually tie it before the half was over, and took it and threw an interception in the end zone. So it's one of those situations, again, where if Kent State can't get on the board early, then Iowa should be able to just pound the rock and be able to take a pretty comfortable lead and just wear out Kent State's defense because at the end of the day, Kent State's not used to going body blow for body blow like Iowa is.
Mike, I'll pass this one back to you because I have a question about your quarterback. I mean, does he typically like to throw the ball as much as, you're saying, or is he more of a runner? Because at least from what I saw anyway, he's really mobile, loves to move his feet. but at least in anyway, from what I'd saw, his passing game wasn't as great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a terrible comparison because Lamar Jackson's a high level athlete, but he's kind of that esque of quarterback. He uses his feet to open up the passing game. A lot of their big plays, and maybe Tyler can correct me if I'm wrong here, especially last year. One of the games I really solely focused on, being from Northeast Ohio, was that wagon wheel game against a very terrible, and by terrible I mean dog shit Akron football team. Well, in the day, like Dustin Crum was having so much success because when he was throwing the ball, it was after a 12-yard QB scramble. One of those things that, I don't want to draw a comparison to a rival for Iowa, but Dustin Crum is kind of like an Adrian Martinez type for Nebraska. He's the type of guy that, yes, he can throw the ball, but the amount of times if you watch Nebraska football, Adrian Martinez misses a wide open receiver. Dustin Crum kind of has that kind of situation sometimes, again, where he's moving so quickly, he overshoots the halfback coming out in a 4 or 5 yard out route. That kind of situation is where Dustin Crum can have issues. Again, Tyler, he's on the sideline, so he sees a little bit more than I do from the guy watching from his couch in Nebraska. But, that's something that I think, again, for Kent State purposes, you're going to have to keep an eye, on the ability. If Iowa is keeping Dustin Crum in the pocket, yeah, Iowa's going to have success because again, Dustin Crum, unfortunately, doesn't have the greatest of accuracy. And unfortunately, too, and again, Tyler maybe can correct me, but I believe the defensive backs for Iowa have a major advantage over the receiving corps at Kent State.
Yeah, I mean, this is just me projecting because obviously I was not a part of Kent State at all a year ago. I watched some film, I looked at the numbers, and really quickly, let's go back and revisit that 4-game season that Dustin Crum had. He was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year. In 4 games, he put up 1,181 yards. He had 12 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, completed 74% of his freaking passes. And then you look at what he did on the ground. He put up 240 yards on the ground in 4 games, 4 touchdowns, did not fumble the ball one single time. There were expectations placed on him coming into the season that he was going to be able to replicate that. But let's be completely honest, that was against a terrible, terrible, terrible schedule when you look at some of the teams that they played. And some of that did get exposed against Buffalo. But I mean, you look at that Bowling Green game. I mean, Bowling Green had the worst rushing defense in the country. They allowed 315 yards a game on the ground. So, again, I think that Crum has a ton of talent. But I think there is, to a degree, that shadow of the expectation, that he is going to become a highly touted NFL prospect potentially this season, that he can replicate the kind of numbers he put up a year ago. And I think what we're seeing is him kind of regress back to what he is. And that is a very, very solid quarterback who is a dual threat, who can run when he needs to. But for my liking, I'd still like to see him be a little bit more aggressive. And I think that's something he's kind of grown into a little bit. I think the VMI game helped certainly with that. But as far as where Dustin Crum is at, I think that we're really going to see, the final product here in this final year. And I think games like the one against A&M and like the one upcoming against Iowa are going to speak a lot to that.
And that's what's tough too for Kent State. And just in general, whenever you play a MAC team at any Power 5 level, I know one thing that drives me nuts with the MAC is I think now the Sun Belt's being what it is, we are the worst conference in college football. I went to Buffalo, Nebraska this past weekend just to cheer on the MAC. And I honestly had expectations that Buffalo was going to give Nebraska a run for their money. And Buffalo is one of those teams, again, that was receiving first place votes to win the MAC East this year, just like Penn State was. Western Michigan was kind of a dark horse in the West and got rolled by Michigan. We've seen the MAC kind of go up against these Power 5 teams, Big Ten especially. I mean, Ohio couldn't even beat Duquesne, and they were a MAC preseason dark horse to win the East. So unfortunately, it's really hard to kind of translate that over. I want to believe that the MAC has an upset in them somewhere, but it's hard to look at the MAC right now and take those numbers, like what Tyler mentioned, how well Kent State did offensively against Bowling Green and Akron and Eastern Michigan, even Buffalo last year, but at the same time, they dropped 41 against the MAC runner-up in Buffalo last year. They lost 70-41. I mean, that's a ridiculous score. That's a basketball score. Virginia basketball fan, that's more than what Virginia basketball scores. So it's insane to me that, the MAC has such a high scoring ceiling, but at the same time, it never translates over very well against the Power 5. And that's what's concerning. I was hoping that by this time, we would be looking at minus Northern Illinois' upset win over Georgia Tech. There really hasn't been much, for the MAC to kind of hold their head on. I mean, when Ohio hosted Syracuse week 1, I genuinely thought Syracuse was going to lose that game in Athens. and Syracuse took it to Ohio. We've now kind of seen where Ohio's at. I mean, Akron jumped out to a 14-0 lead to Temple and lost 45-14. I don't know if you saw Temple and Rutgers. Rutgers won 61-14. So the MAC's, I guess the whole transitive property, I'm not a huge believer in it, but at the same sense, like no real outlier here that gives the MAC, it gives me a ton of hope that even the top tier team like Kent State in the MAC is really going to go up, especially let alone any Big Ten team, like even Maryland next week for Kent State, but especially a team that's of Iowa's caliber that, you know, was slept on all year. I mean, I still don't understand how they weren't the Big Ten West preseason favorite, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know how you can translate those numbers because, I mean, let's be honest, the MAC defenses are pretty brutal.
Really quickly, I just have one more point that I wanted to make. I'm not trying to take your guys' show hostage or anything, but I think I think the one piece of this that has not necessarily been addressed as much as it needs to be is Sean Lewis. Sean Lewis has done something at Kent State that I have not seen at any other collegiate program in a very, very long time. He took a program that was dead in the water, that was doing absolutely nothing, that was spinning in circles, winning 2 games a season. And he has built something here that I think differentiates itself from a lot of these other teams that you hear about in the MAC. And it's really starting to come into fruition here this year. You look around at this team, you look at the playmakers, you look at the guys that are stepping up. 2 of their best offensive linemen are transfers. 5 of their best defensive players are transfers. They just got a great wide receiver coming in here from Syracuse this season. I mean, again, you're starting to see players coming from Power 5 programs. The right tackle in Bill Kudak is from Kansas State. He comes in to play at Kent State. I mean, again, these are not the kinds of things that you typically see, but you know, again, it's hard to understand from the outside, but then I got here and I had a chance to talk to Coach Lewis and just kind of look at the way he runs this program. And there's something different about this. This team does not feel like kind of your classic MAC team that's just going to go run the score up and not come out and play defense. He wants to do things in a different way. And I think he finally this year has the pieces to do that. And that's made this team very fun to watch. And I think this program is definitely trending in the right direction.
One quick add-on to that I thought was really, it's pertinent to what happened with USC, of course, Clay Helton getting fired. Again, this is all message board stuff, but just to give you an idea of how much, you know, respect Sean Lewis has across the country. You know, James Franklin is kind of one of those names being thrown around right now for USC. And some Penn State message boards, of course, start playing devil's advocate and looking at if James Franklin does leave Penn State. And one of the top 5 names that keep showing up is Sean Lewis. And that's kind of crazy to think about because, again, he's such a, like Tyler said, such a weird style. He wants to do things so differently compared to the rest of the country. But it's kind of the same type of love. And again, it hasn't been working out as well for Syracuse, but when Dino Babers left Bowling Green, kind of the same type of stuff where people were just awed by what was going on, especially again, I mean, Tyler can see it every single day. The facilities at Kent State, I can't harp it enough. If you gentlemen from Iowa have not looked up what Dick's Stadium looks like in Ohio, it is a glorified high school football field. I mean, he has, when you're recruiting at Kent State, I mean, the fact that your arch rival Akron 15 minutes up the road has a very nice stadium, a brand new indoor facility, and they can't even compete with Kent State's recruiting classes is insane to me. That's how well of a guy Coach Sean Lewis is. And again, he's getting the respect slowly but surely nationally. I don't know if you guys want to look for something really cool, go back and look at when Jimbo Fisher was previewing the Kent State game, all of the love he was giving Sean Lewis. I mean, this is Jimbo Fisher, a guy that's winning, who's won a national title before, who's now the highest paid coach in college football. I mean, that kind of stuff. And again, I'm not trying to, you know, throw the horn around, but even Nick Saban, and for those of you that don't know, his alma mater is Kent State. So he actually, you know, hyped, he even said that he thinks that Sean Lewis is potentially the future of college football. So that's something you can kind of add to as well. Again, that doesn't necessarily affect how Kent State's going to perform on the field for Iowa this week, but in terms of where Kent State's going, and again, this is not just some low-level MAC team. This is a MAC team that, again, Tyler alluded to it, really is doing something special. And I mean, if you guys want to get a laugh, seriously, go look at Dick's Stadium in Kent. It is. I played there in youth football 15 years ago, and it had 15 years.
It's very interesting. And you said it, Micah. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, if Sean Lewis is the future of coaching in college football, he's going to have a heck of a test this Saturday against the longest running head coach in college football in Kirk Ferentz. So I think that'll be an interesting matchup and a perfect segue to kind of move us forward into looking at Dylan's Keys to the Game, which is a segment that we look at each week. And feel free to hop in and tell us some keys to the game, maybe for Kent State as well. So, Dylan, take it away.
Absolutely. And just so you guys know, I always like to give my keys to victory from the week prior so we can see how I did. So offensively versus Iowa State, I said we had to establish the run and it would be the Spencer Petras coming out party. And I think my bold take was that he was going to throw 4 TDs. So I was wrong. But they ran the ball well enough, and Spencer Petras played well enough along with that defense to win the game. So I'm calling it a win, and I'm calling it a correct prediction. So that is what it is. Defense, you had to contain Brock Purdy and Brees Hall rushing the ball and then win the turnover margin. They did that. So I'm pretty reliable. And then on special teams, I said a punt won the game in 2019. So kicking and punting will win the game Saturday. Now, when I said that, I really did not believe that punting would win that game. But if you watch that game, that was a nonstop field position battle. And Iowa State's punter was not up to the task compared to Tory Taylor. So you Kent State fans might be laughing so much at us, talking about how important this position is, especially in the Big Ten. But field position is so crucial, along with time of possession, that Kirk Ferentz and that boa constrictor mentality that I talk about, about just squeezing the opponents to death, essentially just squeezing out the clock and winning that special teams battle. They did it again. And Tory Taylor, my God, I would damn near consider him the MVP of that game. He played out of his fucking mind. So
Tory Taylor is like low-key probably one of my favorite players on the team, the punter. Let's go, baby.
Oh, same. I think he has a very good shot at winning the Ray Guy Award. So call that a bold take. I don't really think that's that bold. So, but moving on, my keys to victory for this week versus Kent State. Offensively, we have to establish the running game. You cannot get the passing game going in that Iowa offense without first establishing the run. Yeah, I think this is the week to do it. If this Kent State defense has a weakness, their strength without a doubt is getting turnovers. You look at their 2 cornerbacks, Montre Miller and Elvis Hines. Between the 2 of them have 8 interceptions, I believe. It was either 7 or 8, but I know the defense in total has 8 interceptions. So I'm pretty sure it's 7 between the 2 of them. But still, I mean, these guys are absolute ball hawks, and it doesn't matter who you're playing. We have to be wary of that. So if we could start out running the ball and, get these guys creeping up a little bit and give a chance for our wide receivers to get open, I think we can have a field day. So offensively, we got to establish that running game. Defensively, you got to make Dustin Crum beat you with his arm. And so I think that's what we saw a little bit in the second half of that Texas A&M game, looking at the film where, Micah touched on it a little bit ago too, where, when he's playing from behind, you start seeing him forcing things, making bad throws, and that's where most of his turnovers were coming from. So if you can make him beat you with his arm rather than, what are the 2 names? Marquez Cooper and Tyler, who is your other running back? I forgot his name already.
Xavier Williams. Yep.
Xavier Williams. Thank you. That's who it was. Okay. I forgot to write his name down, but yeah, it just cannot let those guys beat you on the ground. And so if you force Dustin Crum, to beat you with his arm, I think we're going to have a really, really good time Saturday afternoon. And then special teams, I'm saying we need to have 1 return TD. Now, I know absolutely nothing about Kent State special teams, but we've been so close. Charlie Jones has been so close to breaking a punt return versus Indiana, versus Iowa State. I think this is the week that he can do it. And, winning the field position battle. I touched on it earlier, but punting is proven to be a crucial part of this 2021 Iowa Hawkeyes team. And, most of the listeners probably won't remember this, but 1981 Iowa Hawkeyes, Kirk Ferentz brought it up because he was a member of that coaching staff. He said, and he said he was half joking when he said it, but Tory Taylor genuinely reminds him of Reggie Roby. For those of you that don't know who Reggie Roby is, he's a Hall of Fame NFL punter, passed away a few years back, I think, but played a long time with the Miami Dolphins after his time at Iowa and was a big part of that 1981 team that went to the Rose Bowl. So, I mean, that just goes to show you the level of praise that Tory Taylor gets for this being his only 2nd year of football ever. Kirk Ferentz said it in the press conferences today where, yeah, this guy doesn't really know what he's doing football wise, but he can kick the ball, and he's a great guy to have around the team. So hell yeah, love to see it. So, but that, fellas, is my keys to victory. Tyler and Micah, let's hear your keys to victory for Kent State this weekend.
Sure. Yeah, I think I think for Kent State, I mean, again, a lot of things are going to have to go right if they're going to pull off an upset, especially on the road against one of the toughest teams in the Big Ten in Iowa. But I think there are two big factors that this comes down to for me. The first is going to be time of possession. You cannot let Iowa spend all day long on the football field, which means they have to find a way to slow down that rushing attack, force Iowa to drop back and pass, and maybe try to get some turnovers as well. Against VMI, again, they won 60-10. They outdid them in yardage 698 to 288. They only won the time of possession battle by 3 minutes. That's it, because of how quickly that offense works. So they got to find a way to stay on the field a little bit. They got to find a way to get that defense off the field. But the other thing, this team has learned how to flash fast. They need to learn how to flash smart. The penalties were a massive problem against VMI. 9 penalties, 98 yards, most of those of the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or variety. And they had a touchdown taken away because Marquez Cooper front flipped into the end zone. They called it a spot foul at the 1 yard line and took those 6 points off the board. That cannot happen if you're going to upset a team like Iowa on the road. So those are my two big keys. Again, find a way to get that defense off the field, work what you have on offense. And then for the love of God, just keep your head about you when it comes to these penalties. Again, you learn to flash smart. Who knows? Maybe this team will do more than just cover.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think my biggest key, I'm kind of glad Tyler didn't touch on it because I've been adding some research just to make sure I was right. So the last 5 Kent State losses, so we're going back all the way to 2019. Of course, they've lost 1 game this year, 1 game last year, and then they had 3 straight losses in 2019 in MAC play. They didn't score first. Every other game they've scored first or scored on their first drive. So that's something that's really, really big for Kent State. I mean, last year, their only loss was to Buffalo, 70-41. They still scored 41 points. You know what the problem was? They were unable to score on their first 3 possessions. So if Iowa can come out, we saw it at Texas A&M. Kent State did score a field goal on their first drive, but after that, they did absolutely nothing. If you can win those first 4 possessions, if you're Iowa, then you should have an easy day with Kent State. But if Kent State can drive down the field, and let's say they put up 14 in the first 4 possessions they have, they're A, going to feel confident. 2, it's playing into Kent State's style. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, yeah, you dropped 38 against Indiana, but how much was that? How much was that of that was the defense scoring? So Iowa's offense is not known for getting into shootouts. So if Kent State can kind of push it there, that could potentially, of course, play into Kent State's favor. But when we see it with Kent State, they need to start. I mean, the flash fast thing also applies to starting fast. They have to score first. They have to be on the board. They have to have some confidence because at the end of the day, if their first 3 drives are 3 and outs, or, again, maybe one first down tops per drive, there's not much for them. And Kent State, you mentioned special teams. They don't have a bad special teams unit, but they're not really used to punting in the MAC. So forcing them to kind of play the field position battle, not something Kent State's really used to doing. I mean, again, when they played Texas A&M, they lost the field position battle pretty heavily to Texas A&M. So again, you mentioned Iowa's strengths in terms of that's what they need to do to win. I mean, really, it's kind of a flip with Kent State. They got to win the field position battle, but they honestly have to. Like, if Kent State's down 14-0 early in the first, like midway through the first quarter, I'm not saying I'm turning the game off because I'm still going to put myself through it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to start wondering whether Kent State can even cover at that point.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, we can move straight into our predictions, and we like to do a little section where we have any hot takes for this game. Whether that would be, aimed at the betting lines for the degenerates out there, or whether it's just something that, you think is going to happen. So we can go into that. And Bo, I don't know if you want to get us started with predictions for this upcoming Saturday's game against Kent State and any hot takes you got, and we can go forward from there.
Yeah, I'll start out with a hot take. So I know a lot of this, we talked a lot about the rushing game for Iowa really needing to get hot. But my hot take this week, and for those who are Iowa fans watching the game, have been really pissed that we haven't had Tyrone Tracy in the passing game lately. So my hot take is he's going to have more than 3 targets this week, or more than 3 catches. I think it's going to be really important for our passing game to get him involved. And I think Petras really needs to stop looking down his tight ends and start looking for some of those receivers, especially with how much hype we've had around Tyrone Tracy in the offseason. So I'm going to go with Tyrone Tracy having more than 3 targets and catches. But I really think, again, after talking to everybody here today, that Kent State is going to keep it around for a little while. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I think that Iowa's going to take this one. 34-17 is what I have with the Iowa Hawkeyes beating the Kent State Flashes. So I'll pass it to who's ever next, but I got the Hawks winning this week.
You go ahead, Rob. And also next week, we're going to have a segment called Bo's Warm Takes, since he refuses to ever have a hot take. Tyrone Tracy is going to have 3 receptions. Are you kidding me?
He look back at the last 2 games. He hasn't had more than 2.
Whatever. Rob, go ahead.
So now I'm scared to give mine. Is mine going to be warm? No, I'm just kidding. Here we go. So in my opinion, I think where this game is headed is going to be an Iowa win, but I have the score 38-21. I think it's going to be a high scoring affair. I think that we're going to see the over hit in this game, which is, partly leads into my prediction there at 38-21 for the Hawks. My hot take, I think that all of our running backs who are in rotation are going to come up with touchdowns. So I think that's going to be, Ivory Kelly Martin, Tyler Goodson, and then all of a sudden
Gavin Williams.
Gavin, yeah, we'll go ahead and put him there. But anyways, no, Sean Williams. No, Gavin. I'm thinking Gavin. Anyways, all 3 going to have touchdowns. So that's what my hot take is for this game. What do you think, Dylan?
Well, first of all, I could not be more upset that my hot take, well, first, Bo had a warm take, and then you just flat out steal my hot take from the outline that was sent out. I could not be more upset.
Is that what, hold on, let me go back. Is that what you have?
That sure is. Yeah, check that outline again. That's okay.
Wow.
That's okay. I'll switch it up. What? No big deal.
If you want to switch, I can switch. I'll switch mine. You had yours first. I literally did not mean to do that.
No, you remember I told you to go first.
Oh.
It's my own fault. I should have known.
Okay. I think it's going to be a rushing affair. So anyways, continue.
We got Bo with his warm takes, and we got Rob with his Benedict Arnold-like behavior. So anyways, Iowa, we're going to win this ball game, and the score is going to be 38-13. That's my prediction there. As far as a hot take goes, I had written down that I felt like Iowa was going to have 4 rushing TDs. I'm throwing that out the window because Rob stole it. So I'm changing it up. So I'm going to say we get in the end zone, and it's going to be through the arm of Spencer Petras. I'm going complete 180. Complete 180. Yes, we're going to have 150 yards plus rushing, but Spencer Petras is going to have 3 touchdowns. So a 2-part hot take there. Tyler, what do you got for score prediction, and what's your hot take for the game?
Yeah, so Bo has inspired me to go lukewarm. I think when the game kicks off at 3:30, the sun's going to be in the sky. That's my no, I'm just messing around. No, in all seriousness though, I'm going Hawkeyes 34-17. And I think my hot take is actually looking at this line and looking at the way I think that Iowa's going to try to play this, bet the under. Again, you're thinking over, you're thinking that MAC team, the top scoring offense in the country last year. I don't know how much time they're going to be spending on the field, and I don't know how productive their time on the field will be. And honestly, I think if everything goes perfectly for Iowa, they do all of this in the minimal number of drives. They spend as much time as possible on the field. They punch in at the last second. I honestly feel comfortable taking the under in this game. So that's my hot take. Sorry,
wow. Well, I'm a little disappointed in Tyler because I actually had 2. One of my hot takes was going to be the under as well. So just to kind of back up what Tyler said, because, for those of you that like gambling, I don't actually gamble, but I love the process behind all of that. In the last Power 5 games, last 5 Kent State has played, and that has included Clemson, Wisconsin, Auburn, of course, Texas A&M, and then I think it was Ohio State, I believe was the other one. Kent State has either been under, or when they've hit the over, the team they played hit the over by themselves. So to give you an idea, I don't think Iowa is going to score 56 points or 50, whatever spread you're looking at. So that's why I'm leaning under. They hit the under against Texas A&M. They actually only hit the over against VMI by half a point. The spread was 16, or the over-under was 69.5, and they 70 total. So they literally cleared it by half a point. So I'm going to go under as well. This is it's 2 things, but it's one giant hot take. I think Iowa's going to have 20 more snaps on offense than they will have at any point the rest of the season in any game. And I think Iowa is going to eclipse 500 yards of total offense. Texas A&M's putt offense was able to do it. Yes, I think Iowa's offense is as good as Texas A&M's offense. I think that they're looking at 500 yards again as well. Kent State loves to give up chunk plays. They do like forcing field goals and forcing turnovers in the red zone. Texas A&M turned the ball over twice in the red zone as well against Kent State. So it's kind of a, we don't want it, we'll give it back to you kind of thing with Kent State and A&M in the red zone. So I think that Iowa's going to move the ball with ease. It's just a matter of whether they actually finish off drives. And if you're smart, Iowa, you'll realize what Texas A&M did in the second half and run the ball in instead of trying to throw it in.
Excellent.
And I've got to make my score prediction too. I think it's going to be 37-10. I think it's going to be very similar to the same score A&M and Kent State played in.
Okay. So you got Iowa covering, Micah, but you're still hitting the under, correct?
I do have Iowa. I don't trust Kent State's ability to put up points early, and I don't trust Kent State's ability to have to be able to go at the pace they want to. A&M was able to wear out that defense to the point where if Iowa really wants to, they can run for 3 yards every single play in that third and fourth quarter and just make Kent State stay on the sidelines. And Dustin Crum is 100% one of those quarterbacks that needs to be in a groove to be successful through the air.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Well, great predictions, everybody. And really the last thing we got here is our Hawkeyes and Tallboys mailbag. And one of these questions, and I'm going to pose this one to both of our Kent State correspondents that we got here in the building today. They want to know, guys, and I guess us Iowa fans can answer this too. It doesn't matter. But which Iowa player reminds you the most of Kent State legend Julian Edelman?
Ooh.
Oh,
Are we going Julian Edelman in college or Julian Edelman in the NFL? Because, I mean, I'm sure you guys might be aware, Julian Edelman was a quarterback at Kent State. He was not a wide receiver.
Correct.
Julian Edelman, the quarterback in college who was, well, for lack of a better term, just athletic.
Mm-hmm.
Or are we going with the Julian Edelman that was Tom Brady's favorite receiver for a couple of years winning Super Bowls?
I'd say either or.
Oh man, my Iowa football history is not great.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man.
You guys are Iowa guys. Who's been over the last 10 years your Jack Army knife? Like you're kind of guy that maybe has been. I don't know. I mean, obviously it's a different side of the ball. The first guy that comes to mind would be like Desmond King because he was incredible on defense, but I mean he was a danger in special teams. So that's maybe my closest argument. I guess I can make. Again, it's completely different side of the ball, but. I mean, what Desmond King was able to do, not only, of course, defensively as a defensive back, but again, I mean, I could be wrong, but it felt like almost every other week he was taking a return of some sort 20, 30 yards down the field. So maybe probably the closest thing in terms of just being a multifaceted player that can beat you in multiple ways.
Absolutely. No, and I guess when I saw this question, I was thinking kind of like you as well, where, more of that Julian Edelman in college. So I was thinking CJ Beathard for the Iowa fans out there. 2015, yeah, he was mainly just a quarterback, but the dude made plays on his feet. And when I think of Julian Edelman, I just think of a hard-headed football player, a guy that wasn't afraid to stick his head in there against, some of the toughest linebackers and the toughest safeties in the league. And probably saw a lot of that in college from him as well. So that's my pick, CJ Beathard. What do you guys all got?
Yeah, I had Tim DeWitt. Never the biggest guy.
Oh, that's a good one.
Fast, and one of those players that built his way up from the bottom and never quit. So I had
That's
Tim
a good
DeWitt.
one. Timmy D, that's a good one. Tyler, you got one?
Honestly, I've been trying to. Again, my Iowa history is a little rusty for sure. Dwight's probably better than anything I could have said. Like, as much as I hate to just freeload off a bow down there, that's actually a really good take. And I don't have enough of a depth of knowledge to pull anything better than Tim Dwight out of my tail end right now. So I'll go with that.
And then how about yourself, Rob? You got one?
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of this year's current team, the players on this roster. I was thinking either a Charlie Jones or like a Tyrone Tracy, somebody who's shifty and can make plays with their feet. I don't know. That was the only people that came to mind for me. But I was thinking more of this current year's team than past years. So
Sure.
good question. Excellent question from one of our
That's a
listeners.
good question. And then we do got one more as well. And so they want to know, guys, and this is mainly for the Hawk fans, but feel free to chime in if you got anything, fellas. Is it realistic to think the D can continue to cover up for the offense? And that one's from Tom, a buddy of mine up in Cedar Falls, follower of the podcast. And I think it's absolutely realistic. You know, you hear that old saying back from your high school football days, all of us, offense is going to win you the games during the regular season, but defense is going to win you the championships when it counts. So, I mean, what do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's I think that's a relevant question, especially when you look at this year's team. We had some question marks coming into this year. I definitely did not think that they were going to be as good as they seem to be so far. I also think it's a small sample size. You know, we've played two pretty good programs these last 2 weeks. So I think that it's it makes sense to wonder about that. You know, when are we going to break? When are we going to have a team? Are we going to be this good all year? I think that we have found some decent depth in our secondary, which has been able to kind of give us the ability to play at a lot of different, I guess, give them some different looks. But I've been really impressed with our defensive line getting pressure, which I was not very confident in going into the season. So I think as long as our D line continues to get pressure, then I think that the sky's the limit for our defense right now. I think our linebackers are playing great. They're making tough tackles. I think that our secondary has been really showing out, and as we thought that they would, they're a lot of veteran players in our secondary. They're able to pick off some balls the last couple of games, but the real question mark was a D line, and so far so good. So I'm going to say tentatively, yeah, you can continue to expect that. We are going to get tested towards the end of the. Not saying that we're going to get tested, not going to get tested against Kent State, but I do think that it's going to be interesting to see like how they hold up. You know, when we get into the belly of the season. You know, when we start to look at game 7, 8, 9, things like that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add, and I'm not sure if you guys had already said this too, but I think it's going to be on the backs of the linebacking core, and not Seth Benson, not Campbell, but Justin Jacobs. I think if we get him more in that cash role, continue to have him play and rotate in and out with Dane Belton, or even be on the field with Dane Belton, I think that this defense can carry the offense. I do think that Spencer Petras is going to grow, and I think a lot of folks, as Dylan alluded to earlier, are ready for a quarterback change. I just don't think that that's in the cards right now. There's nobody who's ready, not a great backup. Now, Padilla, he can run, he can throw. It sounds like he's accurate, whatever, but he's only done that against the second string or the first string there in practice. So I don't think that he's ready. He doesn't have a game snap. So I think the offense will turn around, but I think it's going to be heavily reliant on the defense to continue to do well. Obviously, the secondary is awesome, but our linebacking core is who I'm really looking on to lean on their shoulders here.
I don't know if you guys want an unbiased opinion, but I actually have a take on this too. If you guys,
go ahead. Hell yeah.
So you guys don't know. I've never told you guys. I'm actually a college football traveler. So I've been to 4 Big Ten games in person already this year. I actually went to week 0, Illinois, Nebraska. Went to Ohio State, Minnesota, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Penn State. Actually, I've been to 5 now. I think about it. So I went to Nebraska and Buffalo last week as well. So I've been to 5 Big Ten stadiums just this year. Kind of a traveler, like I said. I used to work for the ACC. For those that can, I don't know if you guys do live stream for those or not, but you can see all the ACC garbage behind me. I used to work for the ACC full time. So I've always been an ACC type guy. So now that I live in Nebraska, I'm trying to re-get my Big Ten roots from growing up in Ohio. And there's no offense. And this is, again, I have a little bit of an ACC bias, of course, having formerly worked for them. But the Big Ten does not have a quarterback that scares me. So defensively, when you're a defense like Iowa, that's just honestly, like you said, the secondary is incredible. I've been impressed with what I've seen. I mean, the fact I was actually going to go to Indiana, Iowa, but I was like, that game might be a blowout. I didn't expect it to be as bad of a game as it actually ended up being. Shout out to Iowa for playing lights out in that game. I mean, I look at Iowa's schedule, and honestly, the only game, having seen what I've seen in person offensively, the only offense that scares me is honestly Maryland. And you're the better team in that situation. I mean, Maryland, again, obviously it's Tua's brother, so there's that. But, Mike Locksley likes to run up tempo, loves to spread the rock. They made the West Virginia defense, which again, it's Big 12 defense, but let's be honest, when you think Big 12 defense, you think West Virginia or you think Iowa State. So those are the two schools you think of, and they've had their way with West Virginia's defense. I think Iowa's defense is better than West Virginia, but from my opinion, I mean, you're going to be able to score against Illinois. I am actually a Virginia alum, and you saw what we did to Illinois last week in football. There's something there's something there. I mean, Northwestern, it's a Clemson castaway. Graham Mertz is overrated as heck. I mean, I don't care if I get I get hot takes. Penn State's offense is terrible. And they're a defensive team. I can't wait for a 6-3 win for you guys against Penn State on hopefully a primetime game on Saturday.
Hell yeah.
But, at the end of the day, like I just, again, from a non-Iowa fan perspective, I don't see why, when I say I think Iowa's, I'm going to knock on wood for your guys' sake, destined for a potential 12-0 Big Ten West championship, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility because the two best offenses you're probably going to face, in my opinion, are Maryland and Minnesota. And you're better than both of those teams. Friday night in Maryland before Penn State is probably the only game where I'm like, Iowa it would be hilarious kind of thing because Iowa would be ranked 3rd or 4th in the country and then they lose to a Maryland team that's not ranked. But outsider's perspective, I'm very high on Iowa. And, I know because a couple years ago, you guys were just on the cusp of the playoffs. I think this Iowa team, again, from an outsider's perspective, is much better than that team. And that team almost made the playoffs. So, I'm not going to lie to you. I think if I had to pick a team to make the playoffs out of the Big Ten right now, it's Iowa. Having seen Ohio State in person, I think that they're very suspect this year. That's just
especially their defense. Their defense is
they
terrible.
can't stop. I mean, again, I'm an ACC guy. Anthony Brown sucked at Boston College, and he's able to go into the shoe and just sling the rock. I mean, that's a lot. And no offense to 12th year senior Tanner Morgan, but he had some success too throwing the ball against Ohio State in what was a 50-50 crowd in Minneapolis. I saw that first. So.
Absolutely. Well, no, that those are all great takes, and obviously our fans, and as you guys heard in my prediction pregame, my prediction in our Hawkeyes and Tallboys intro was that we would go 12-0. Of course, that was from 2 years ago, but nonetheless, I like it. So, but yeah, awesome. Well, fellas, Tyler, Micah, both, thank you guys so much for coming on the pod. I think it's safe to say we all learned a shit ton about Kent State today, and just enjoy having you guys on, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, and then I did want to give one quick shout out too before we do wrap things up to our buddy Sam Lahr. He actually won our weekly prediction contest where he won himself a 6-pack of Busch Light. And what did that great man do, fellas? He donated it back to the podcast. So, and
wow.
all he asked is that we just keep delivering grade A content, and I'm not going to accept it. So he said he's making it back for a tailgate this year, and it's going to be the Penn State one. So we'll have a 6-pack waiting for him there, but just wanted to shout out Sam Lahr, co-college, fellow D3.
The real MVP, Sam Lahr.
That's right. Real MVP, Sam Lahr. So
perfect.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you guys coming on, and Rob, I'll let you wind this thing up.
We're going to wind it up like we always do, guys, with a little Hawkeye victory polka. For you Kent State guys, this is what happens. This is what you're here after we win on Saturday. Just kidding. Thank you so much. It's been great to have you. Everyone, thanks for listening. You can follow us, on Twitter at @Tallboys. You can follow us. You can find us on Facebook. You can listen to us where you get all your podcasts from. So thank you so much.
And for those of you that don't know, now we are officially on Spotify. So we've been on Spotify a few weeks now. You can find us on YouTube, Google Podcasts, all that fun stuff. So
perfect. Thanks, guys.